Discovery.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0. Liftoff. Americans return to space as Discovery clears the tower.
Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts, where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast. And at the end of the episode, we're going to have a brand new recommendation. And we'll talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Matt.
And this week, we're going to be talking about my recommendation, Uncivil. Uncivil is a podcast by Gimlet Media that is all about the Civil War, but it's from a different angle. And it doesn't matter how much you know about history. I feel like you're still going to learn something listening to this show. It's so good and so well made. They won a Peabody Award for one of their episodes, even the episode The Raid, they won a Peabody Award for. This is the blurb that they have about the show. It says, Uncivil brings you stories that were left out of the official history of the Civil War, ransacks America's past, and takes on the history you grew up with. We bring you untold stories about resistance, covert operations, corruption, mutiny, counterfeiting, antebellum drones, and so much more. And we connect these forgotten struggles to the political battlefield we're living on right now. The story of the Civil War, the story of slavery, Confederate monuments, racism is the story of America. And it's hosted by Ginger Rock Kumanika and Jack Hitt. And what did you guys think about the show?
I mean, first of all, I really liked it. I wasn't sure exactly the angle because you mentioned that, okay, it's a Civil War show, but it's not like a dry history show. It's different than that. And I completely get that now because it really does take you. And I think it's a lot to do with they brought in multiple people that were related to it and the sound's great on it. But you're hearing these things from people about their family. And so it doesn't come across as dry. And I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it was very easy to get lost in the story beyond just the Civil War. Because like I felt the same way. I was like, the Civil War, I mean, kind of know the gist of it, but it really goes in depth about what we listened to, went very in depth about a very specific thing in the Civil War.
What I think to me probably means the most to how good a show is I played an episode with my daughter on our way somewhere, and she didn't really say anything. And so I thought, okay, she didn't like it. It was boring to her. She got in, and we had finished it. And then she got in the car after I picked her back up, and she's like, "Can we listen to another one of those episodes about Civil War?" And I was like, yes. So if my, 12-year-old daughter is wanting to learn more about the Civil War because of the way that this show presented it, that's saying something.
That's pretty wild.
And so I recommended 2 episodes because they're fairly short. They're about 20 minutes total. And so I recommended 2 episodes. One of them was called The Soldiers and the other one was called The Ring. So I guess let's start with the one called The Soldiers, which was about Civil War reenactors and a different angle on that even.
Crazy.
First of all, I always thought these people were really into history. That's what I thought was going to happen. But after hearing, and to be fair, I'm sure not every Civil War reenactor is exactly like the first guy that talks in this episode,
God.
But they kind of sound like turds. That guy specifically is. And
that
so it's
guy,
like, I wasn't expecting them to take it this seriously. I guess it makes sense that they do.
Well, I answered your question, and then you kept asking me about it. Well,
it feels like he knew that was a stupid / horrible thing to say in the very beginning. And so he's like, I don't want to talk about it more. I said it once. Fine. I know that it's backwards and dumb, but I said it and I believe it. Stop talking about it.
And what Zach is specifically referring to is the fact that women are not allowed to be in any way a part of a Civil War reenactment unless they are doing house duties, as the guy said.
No, and wasn't his phrasing something like, I don't want any women on my battalion or something like that. You know, something goofy where it's like, man, you're taking this way too serious and being ignorant at the same time. It's impressive, really, how stupid you are.
Yeah. I also love the idea of like, hey, honey, you want to come reenact with us? It's like, sure, I'll bring some laundry. Like, yeah,
I mean, bring the broom if you have to come, I guess.
Yeah. We'll have you sweep the grass or whatever.
Like I immediately wanted to punch all Civil War reenactors, but then I took a step back. I was like, that's probably not all of them. It's this one guy that they got a hilarious sound clip from because he got all mad that he said something stupid and he asked him about it.
Yeah. And so, question for you guys. Have either of you guys ever been to a Civil War reenactment?
I have not. I've been to some battlefields. Like we did like field trips in middle school and stuff where we'd go to like Gettysburg or whatever, but I've never seen an actual thing. That's the thing. I kind of like the idea of this whole, like, it's like a play, but it's supposed to be as historically accurate as possible. It's an interesting premise.
I've been to one.
You have?
Yeah. And it was very enlightening. It was fun. It definitely is basically an American Ren Fair is what it is, because they sell trinkets and like kettle corn and root beer, and like it's basically like there's all of these other things to do during the day that are to fill time and fill other people's pockets. And then there's the battle, and the battle was fun to watch because, you know, they've got cannons and they've got horses.
So I'm saying it seems cool.
So it was definitely fun to watch. The part that was kind of weird
was that there were women on the battlefield, right? So it was weird.
It ruined my immersion immediately.
There was women on the battlefield, but
what? That's so weird.
But the women were running out of houses screaming. That was their job to do.
So this is everywhere. Everybody's having the same problem happening. Okay.
God.
No, but what was weird is you can go to the camps, like, because these people will be there for the whole weekend, like, or sometimes like a week. So you go to the north, the Union camp, and you can see all them and the way they dressed and stuff, and they're in character the whole time, like while they're hanging out. And they're living in tents and like old like canvas tents. And then you can go to the south and the Confederate Army and see that. It's really interesting, but it's also really weird. And that part was weird to me.
So you can go to the Confederate side, and from what I'm understanding from this episode, they're kind of whitewashing the whole thing. So when you go over there, is it like they're all like, we believe in states' rights and stuff, and then they're like, what about slavery? And they'll be like, what's that now? Like,
I mean, I am curious about that because, like, I was going to ask you guys, would this be something you would do? But we are all from the South, and so we would have to LARP as racists. That would be.
I don't really want to LARP as a racist.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
We could probably get a pass by saying we're from Florida, and they're like, okay, you're
yeah, that doesn't really count. No, I don't know. But I'm just saying it is kind of weird. And I mean, okay, I'm trying to look beyond it. Like they're trying to enact something that happened in the past. They are not a Confederate soldier. They're trying to play that part, but it's still weird.
It feels bad to say, but I feel like there's probably a decent proportion of Civil War reenactors that choose one side that may or may not be racist.
may or may not align with beliefs.
Like that just seems like real toxic. If I were a person of color, I would not want to go to the Confederate camp and hang out.
Even though you know that these are people from now, it's like, maybe I shouldn't. I still think the North is the side I want to be on.
This is the racist side.
I will say, because we're in the South and because we're in Florida, I did, because it was in Ocala is where this was.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it wasn't even Ocala. It was in Brooksville. There's a big one in Brooksville. So it's not even an hour from us. But that's where I went and saw it. And I will say, I got a feeling that they really wish that the South would have
Oh, see, and that's what I'm talking about. Is like I would feel a little like about like I don't want to LARP as a racist. Like I don't know.
Do you ever think that they go rogue? Like the Confederate side goes rogue, and they're like,
oh, and they just start playing off book. There's
and they're like,
you
wild.
guys were all supposed to fall over and act like you're dead, but you're still shooting.
Like the Confederacy will rise. We're going to do it this time.
Yeah.
Ugh, we can't win in a real war. We're going to win in this fake one.
I don't know. It's all just so silly.
Well, and then that's what I wanted to, the background of this was, it was so interesting to be like, oh, keep women out of it. And then to follow that through line, and then also approach it, the through line of the whitewashing of it. And like, was just very,
you guys really should listen to the rest of this show. Like there's only like 10 episodes or something like that. They are all so good. There is an episode about whitewashing history that is extremely eye-opening. It's crazy. It's crazy. And the thing that blew my mind is how much of it I was taught growing up, basically. And it's kind of startling, you know?
Yeah.
Dude, I can't even I forget if I'm blending the episodes together, but when they were talking about Robert E. Lee being a great general, it's like, I learned that, hey, you know what? He's a great general. Fighting for the wrong side, but great general nonetheless. It's like, what? A fascinating
and I
thing.
mean, it wasn't until probably college where I actually read the Articles of Secession, which kind of I'll let everybody kind of make their own judgment calls, but you can really get a sense of why they seceded from the Articles of Secession.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, the narrative that has been spun, the spun narrative is that it was about states' rights. And on that episode, they bring up some stuff that was really eye-opening. They're like, have you ever read the Articles of Confederacy? It talks about slavery 88 times.
Yeah, the whole time.
It's like it talks about slavery 88 times in one page. And then they start describing the Confederate bills. Like the $1 bill has black people picking cotton. The $5 bill has slaves loading cotton. The $10 bill has, and it's all it's what it was. It's what it was. It was states' rights to own slaves.
To maintain slavery. Yes.
So anyway, we got a little bit off track, but
sorry.
It's a great show that tackles all of those things. Yeah. But the episode that we were talking about with the soldiers was about specifically women. They brought the angle about the Civil War reenactors to then circle back around to women's actual role in the Civil War. That's what I thought was really cool about this episode.
Yeah, and once again, something that you're never going to hear in history class, because it sounds like they had to really dig. And they had like 3 people in this episode who were kind of talking about the women who fought, and they all kind of knew of each other. So I don't think it's a huge circle of people. I think that it's not a very well-known history. And most of the people that were talking about it were related to the people who did this, who would, because essentially what was happening here is women would dress up as men and join the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And so I see Kirk has pulling a Mulan in the notes, and that is exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Where they dress up as a man so they can go fight. And because also one of the really interesting parts to me was there was letters from one person who did this, and the whole time they were just saying that they felt a freedom that they never felt before because they were being treated like a man, and they were just getting tons of money. They had tons of everything. And so it's just, and that's, I think
her name was Rosetta, but she went by Lyons Wakeman. And they even said that when she died, that's what's on her gravestone is her fake name.
Yeah, no. And like everything has started to shift now, but we're talking about now the hosts we're talking about, that could have been their real identity the whole time was as a male. But back then that was on zero people's radar. It was essentially they made up rules to kick people out. What did they say? Sexually non compatible or something. They had some weird thing so that they could kick women that they found out were hiding as men out. I can't remember. They made up rules to do it.
Yeah. But it's just it's really crazy to hear of these very valiant women that wanted to fight for, for their essential freedom. And that Lyons Wakeman was a really cool story and interesting. But the one that blew my mind, and they said they don't have a lot of information because it was just, it was a black female. So how much information do you have in history for that time when that person didn't have rights on 58 different levels, but her name was Maria Lewis. She was 17 years old. So she was a black woman who fought as a white man named George Harris. So she somehow was so good at, I guess, disguising herself that she was able to not only disguise herself as a man, but as a white man to be able to fight. And she was very successful, like very. Yeah. And it was just a crazy story. And I really do love, and there was a mastery of storytelling in the way that they started the story and then they ended it, because they tied in the role of women in the Civil War with that whole lawsuit against the government for discrimination.
No, and it wasn't originally. That's the one that really drives the nail home in the coffin that you're talking about, where we weren't taught the things. These things weren't taught, and they probably won't be unless there's something major that changes. Because as she was suing the national parks for this, she talked to her lawyer about, like, look, all these women were actually in the Civil War, so we could just say this is history. They were in the Civil War. I can be one of them. And they said, don't go with history because the United States government does not acknowledge any of this ever happened. Yeah. None of it. Like zero of these women are acknowledged by the United States as having done this. So it really does drive home that point of, you are probably not going to learn this in high school. So it really is just so interesting to hear kind of this angle on it.
Yeah. So this was one of my favorite episodes just because it was the storytelling was like so beautiful, like the way they did it. And also, like, I didn't know that there was these extremely brave women that were doing this kind of stuff. And I mean, basically both of these stories, I didn't realize until right now, are about really brave women, like
yes,
super brave women. Like the second one we're talking about, which was the episode called The Ring, which is about a spy ring. That one blew my mind. This one was my favorite episode of the whole series that I listened to.
Yeah, really incredible story. And it just makes you wonder about Mary Bowser and, like, I don't know. I want to hear a full story. I know there's not much available. There's not a bunch of history around this incredible story, but it just makes you want to know more.
Yeah. So they get a special guest on that episode, Khadija Costley White. So she's a professor in journalism and media at Rutgers University, and she brings the discussion of Mary Bowser, who she had been freed by her master. I forget her master's last name, but her name was Elizabeth. Her first name was Elizabeth. And she had freed her, and she helped her with a bunch of different stuff. She even paid for her wedding, sent her off to somewhere that she had wanted to go. And then she ended up bringing her back, and they basically become friends. And it was just this crazy story of this lady Elizabeth she had freed herself before the Civil War. In the Civil War
she became an abolitionist as maybe just because she became friends with this woman, and she started to question everything that she was taught to believe.
Yeah, and as soon as the Civil War started, they thought of an idea of trying to help sabotage the Confederacy through sending messages and being part of a spy ring. So that's what they started doing. And some of the ways they sent messages sounded really cool. I love spy stuff anyway. I just think that stuff's fascinating. And what did you guys think about that kind of stuff?
Oh, little pinholes in letters. Amazing.
That
Love
one
it.
was the one that, because I could just see it. You know, when they said you just hold it up in front of a light and you just see the mess. It's such a good one. That one was the one where I was like, awesome.
They would put a tiny pinhole in a letter, probably a letter per page, or probably not even, probably like, really spread out in a book. So a whole book would probably do a fairly short message, because they would just put a little pinhole through every letter. You had to put it all together, and that would be the message. And I thought that one was crazy. Hiding the small messages in eggs. So she would have, let's say, a few dozen eggs, but one of the eggs would be hollowed out and have a message in it.
They used a baker as well. They'd hide stuff in the baked goods. But the thing is, all of these things are so commonplace that they go unseen. It's really awesome, like how they were able to think of these ways to hide stuff in plain sight.
Yeah, talking about hiding in plain sight, then Mary Bowser makes a decision, the extremely brave and extremely difficult decision to, as a free woman, to become someone else's slave. And not only someone else's slave.
Not just someone else.
The president, which again, this is something I didn't even know. I didn't know there was a president of the Confederacy. So she lived, or that there was a Confederate White House. She lived in the Confederate White House as a slave to Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. Mind blowing. Yeah,
they messed up. You don't really want to spy like working directly with the president. That's not great.
So I loved how Khadijah, I will say I did laugh, and it was funny because she's like, I think that's against friend code as your white friend.
Don't
it was Elizabeth's idea, the previous owner. It was her idea to have Mary Bowser become a slave to Jefferson Davis. She's like, I think that's breaking friend code.
He's like, there's only 3 rules.
Your white friends can't suggest you become a slave again. It's probably against. I thought that was funny. But it was just a crazy story, and she was very good at spying as well. Like, she had like basically a photographic memory, so she could see something, remember it, and then be able to, parse it out in whichever way that she needed to be able to translate that for the spy ring. And then she would, every time that she had something to tell, she would hang a red shirt or dress or something on the clothesline outside, which was visible from Elizabeth's house. And then she knew that there was a message that needed to be picked up somehow.
So good.
It's just so cool.
Yeah, it was really amazing listening to it the whole time. Have you ever like listened to a show and you're kind of on the edge of your seat and you're just kind of like, oh, you're really locked in the whole time. I was just locked in. I was like, what is she going to do next? And I mean, honestly, even the end, it was just like she sacrificed to get out of there. But in the end, Elizabeth was also there. I cannot remember. I remember there was a close call. I can't remember if they found out that somebody was on to her.
It was something about a hollowed out dish brought to a prison or something.
She used to transport messages to prisoners, like Matt just said. And there was a specific dish where you would put hot water in the bottom to keep it warm. And she used to transport messages in there. And they said that she had a really good like spidey sense for when things were about to go bad. And she had this bad feeling that the guards were a little bit onto her. So that day, instead of having the messages in that area, she actually just had hot water. And she did get stopped that day, and they checked, and supposedly the soldier just scalded his hands because he thought there was something in there. Nope, not this time, boss.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
my favorite thing is that Jefferson Davis ended up like complaining because he's like, how the hell, guys?
Yeah.
The freaking Union soldiers are finding out my orders before my soldiers find out my orders, because she was that good at parsing out the information and getting it to the right spots.
That he does that, and he turns to Bowser. He's like, am I right? And she's like,
I don't know. That's weird, man.
Yeah. He's like, take this note down. I don't get why my orders aren't going out right.
And they did end up having to sneak her out of that White House.
Yeah, it
because
got really hot.
They did, they basically figured out, they didn't know who, but they knew that somebody in this house is letting the secrets out.
God.
And so they ended up sneaking her out in a pile of manure. It's just such a crazy freaking story.
You know what I'm saying, though? Can you imagine the
great.
movie about this where it's just all about Mary Bowser just living this life where she's literally talking to the president of the Confederacy all the time and just almost dying constantly and just
Do you
keeps
realize
going?
how brave that is? Like,
Yeah, it's insane.
The
It's
more you think
insanely
about
brave.
it, the more brave it is, because not only did she already have probably a very difficult upbringing, because anybody that was a black person in America at that time had a difficult life. But then she got freedom, and she had basically a patron that was able to support her. She got married and all this other stuff. And then she risked everything to try to help other people that was previous in her situation that she was in previously. It's just so freaking brave.
It's maybe the most epic way I've ever heard of to tell racists to suck it in the history of time. Because it was so impressive the whole time, everything she was doing. And once again, never had heard that name in my entire life. And that's a shame.
Didn't know that there was, I figured, I guess, that there was spies, but this is just one of those things. It's like, I feel like there's so many things that we just overlook, or it's not as big of a deal, so it's not talked about, or it's been whitewashed, or, there's just, that's what I like about the show is it takes a different view of what, like Matt said, we take for granted because we learned it in school. We think that we know what we know, and that's all there is to know. But we are incorrect. There is a lot more.
Yeah. Well, and there was that show, I think it was called Turning Point. That might have been the Revolutionary Times, but yeah, the idea of spies in the Civil War is something that that didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah,
like spies are.
I know what you're talking about. I think it was the Revolution, right? It was right during George Washington's time,
and even that,
America's first spies or something like that.
Speaking of George Washington, there is an episode of Uncivil that talks all about George Washington's slave. There was a female slave that escaped, and how much he tried to get her back, and it was just another insane story. It was a crazy story. They're so good. Man. And I will say this is going to sound bad, and I don't mean it to. Sometimes when you listen to something about like a war or something that's really dark, like this is dark stuff. It is. This is dark time. This is dark stuff. We don't even want to. This is why it gets whitewashed, because it's ugly. It's ugly.
Painful. Yeah, it's painful.
And it is,
every
this
direction.
is our past.
Right.
And this show does an amazing job at presenting it and not making it easy to swallow, but somehow it's still, I don't feel horrible by the end of the episodes, because I've listened to some other ones where I just like, God, like, I don't believe in humanity anymore. But what they did is they focused on the good. Usually each episode, they focus on the good for somebody brave that did something, and it makes you feel, you're rooting for them. Like I was rooting so much for Mary Bowser, or I was rooting for, Lions Wakeman, and all these, that's how they take the angle. So you don't leave feeling like, I wish that humans didn't exist.
I mean, maybe what it is they focus on the right humans.
Yeah, that exactly.
It really, they shift it to, it's almost at the same time as it's like kind of, there's so much dehumanization happening in all these things. At the same time, there's people who kind of refuse to let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who show how awesome they are regardless of that. So it lets you kind of humanize people simultaneously. But yeah, Really, really great show. Really enjoyed it. I will probably check out all the rest of them.
Thumbs up.
Glad you guys liked it. And I'm sorry because I got excited. I feel like I talked the entire time. You guys didn't even have time to talk.
Good.
I was so excited. It's such a good show. It was so good.
Yeah. I would have just been like, her last name was the same name as a Mario villain. And you're like, good, very good, Matt.
Yes, it was. Oh, man. Well, I have a discovery for next week, or a recommendation. This is actually a podcast produced by Ted and PRX, and it's called How to Be a Better Human. And I'll read you a part of this blurb, and it does say there is one thing that says it isn't your average self-improvement podcast, because that's not really my thing. I don't really like it very much, but this one I did like because it's more, I don't know. It's not, it doesn't feel that way. But yeah, the blurb for this is from your work to your home, and your head to your heart. How to Be a Better Human looks in unexpected places for new ways to improve and show up for one another. Inspired by the popular series of the same name on Ted's idea blog, How to Be a Better Human will help you become a better person from the comfort of your own headphones. And what they do is they will talk to people who are former speakers, former people who have given TED Talks and things like that, and they will follow up with them about kind of one idea, like one nugget of an idea, and they will just kind of have a conversation about it. And these are about 20-minute episodes, so I did bring two of them. The first one is called How Practicing Curiosity Could Help the World Around You with Joe Hansen. And the second one is called Science of Happiness, because it has it's a crossover from the Science of Happiness podcast.
We've talked about that one before, I believe.
Ooh.
And this one is called Scheduling Time to Feel Awe. So that'll be what we're going to talk about next time. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.